Well, folks, thanks for joining us at the start of the week here. We have got a show for you today, so please don't go away. I'm going to try and do this as compactly as possible, but we're going to cover everything from the courts in Canada ruling on everything from poppies to pornography. We've got China and Nigeria that we're going to be talking about today, and Canada's involvement there or lack of involvement, and what the U.S. is doing on some of those fronts. And how about sexual avatars for kids becoming more addicted to these type of things? We're going to comment on the major shakeup at the BBC. Top executives resigning over stuff they edited from some of Trump's speeches. We've got a wild show. Hang on. Thanks for joining in, especially those of you who are new viewers in the U.S. And let's jump right into it today. The courts in Canada over this last week have really caught a lot of attention and have got some people kind of mystified. As we talked about a few days ago, there was a ruling related this is in Canada, to child porn. A couple of guys who've been caught and charged with possession of child porn and also possibly abuse of children, and the Supreme Court of Canada saying it would be too mean, too nasty to have a mandatory minimum of 1 year for those two guys. So that's got attention last week, and by the end of the week, another court, this in Nova Scotia, and then also a similar reflection in the province of Saskatchewan, making a ruling that poppies could not be worn by court staff in the courtroom. That's got a lot of people upset, and they're kind of wondering what on earth, how did it get to be that courts could so overstep their bounds from supposed to be a balance in the so-called separation of powers, and now making pretty outlandish conclusions on things nobody ever thought they'd see. Thankfully, the premier in Nova Scotia, Premier Houston, is upset about this, as are other premiers across the province. We're going to see where it goes, but it does not help the way in which courts are held in public esteem or in lack of public esteem with these kind of rulings. And you may see ongoing continued pressure to bring in something called the notwithstanding clause in Canada, which is kind of a unique constitutional item which allows a province to say on a particular ruling, it only applies in some cases, notwithstanding what the Supreme Court said, we're going to hold off for 5 years on a particular ruling. So it's not overruling a Supreme Court. It's saying we're putting it on hold for 5 years to see how things play out. I think you're going to see an increase in that because of these eye-opening rulings by the Supreme Court and other lower courts. In Canada, there's been, as has been noticed by our friends in the U.S., a real pivot away from deeper involvement with the U.S. and more involvement, even strategic involvement, even more involvement in terms of our high-tech industries with China. Now, as we've said before, as I've said before clearly, I am not for tariffs generally. I do not think they are a good plan for any economy, and I think it's right for Canada to oppose them. There's some people, including myself, who are saying this is going too far, though, when you're trying to show the U.S. you're upset by drawing closer to China on really highly strategic and high-tech items. So yesterday and the day before, we saw a former diplomat or ongoing diplomat speaking out against this and warning Canada. Now, this gentleman's name is Michael Kovrig. He's one of what was called the two Michaels. If you remember the story, this is back in 2018. We had a situation in Canada where, at the request of the U.S., Canadian authorities arrested in Vancouver a top executive for Huawei, the high-tech China firm. She was and is the daughter of the owner of Huawei, a gentleman I met with in China some years ago. And Canada did this at the request of the U.S. They actually arrested her and held her. She was being wanted for some fraud-related charges. That got China quite upset, understandably. They nabbed a couple of Canadian diplomats living and working in China, the two Michaels, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, and they were actually held for about 3 years before they were released. It was an outrageous thing that was done by China. And so, you know, these guys would definitely qualify as being China experts. Michael Kovrig had spent years in China, both as a free person and as someone in jail, and he's saying to Canada, whoa, slow down. Slow down, Prime Minister Carney. This rush into the arms of China may not be a smart thing to do, and certainly it's not going to do anything to enhance security relations with the U.S., so we want to keep an eye on where that's going to take us. In terms of things the U.S. is doing differently than Canada, Donald Trump has come out very strongly in support of Christians who are being either tortured, raped, held hostage, or in some cases massacred by Islamist elements in Nigeria. And he's saying it's time the world stood up and said no to this. It is interesting that mainstream media, how they're treating this. For instance, in Canada, we have lots of comments from the Canadian Liberal government constantly against Israel, for instance, and things that the Canadian government thinks are being done in Gaza that should not be done, but almost zero comment from years of this ongoing slaughter of Christians and attacks of entire Christian towns in Nigeria. It's done by the group called Boko Haram, which is an Islamist group. And I repeat again, for some reason, mainstream media does not like using the word, attaching the word Islamist. They'll say Boko Haram because it sounds a bit more vague, but these are extreme Islamist groups. And a lot of concern about why countries like Canada don't seem to be upset about the slaughter, which even the United Nations says is in the tens of thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands, over the last 3 decades of Nigerians by these Islamist extremist groups. People would like Canada to be speaking up a little more about that. I continue to repeat the name Leah Sharibu, hoping that she becomes a real iconic figure in terms of she was one of the 104 girls, 109 girls, I think it was, that was kidnapped from the School of Science and Technology. This is in Nigeria. All the girls were eventually released after some pretty horrific treatment, but she was not, because she would not renounce her Christian faith. She is still being held somewhere there in Nigeria, northern Nigeria. So keep in mind Leah Sharibu, and also keep in mind, and it's fair to ask, what on earth is the Canadian government thinking by not raising concerns about what's going on in Nigeria and yet continually attacking Israel? On the area of AI and what that's doing to kids, more and more discussion now, and again, more out of the US, Canada, and Canadian media don't seem to be as upset about the development of what's being called sexual avatars. This is actual creations, either by voice or imagery, that kids are able to access on various AI platform networks, highly sexualized material, luring kids into conversations with avatars, with characters and creatures that they create that are incredibly sexualized. All psychologists talk about, and neurosurgeons and others talk about the effect on the brain, the heart, and of course from a spiritual point of view, the effects on the spirit of anybody involving themselves at this type of activity. But of course, adults are free to make their own choices, but for kids to be involved and highly sexualized beginning from 8 years old, concerns are rising. Now, just to see some of the difference in how this is being taken by the owners of the various platforms here. It was about 2 months ago that Sam Altman, and you would know Sam Altman from OpenAI, a huge AI platform, he said 2 months ago, we're not going to be doing this. Our platform is not going to be engaging in this kind of chat material and visual material where kids can make highly sexualized videos just at the push of a button. He said, we're not going to be doing this. That was 2 months ago, but now he's recently said, as he's watched the success of Elon Musk's platform XAI, that's X obviously standing for X-rated material, and again, involving technology that makes it incredibly easy for a person to make just about any video they want at the touch of the screen on anything they can imagine, and kids being drawn into this. Now, Elon Musk, and also we see this with Mark Zuckerberg over at Meta, and they've got a little item called Chatbot. These guys are saying, you know what, we're going to put age gates, they're called, age restrictions. We're going to protect kids from getting it. All that means is you're tapping on the screen saying you're over 18 and you have all of this available to you. This is stunning stuff. The rate of increase of kids being pulled into highly sexualized, even addictive behaviors is frightening a lot of people, as it should. And laws are being drawn up, but it's seeming and looking like it's very difficult to be able to compete against this. One possible bright spot on the horizon, we'll see how this goes. You may have heard of Skydance Media. They just purchased Paramount, pretty huge. David Ellison is the owner. David Ellison is the son of media magnate Larry Ellison. And Skydance Media is coming up with some very successful movies, and they're taking a very different approach. They, in fact, have gone what we would say non-woke. They're not pushing the DEI stuff. They're not pushing all the woke material. They haven't gone off the deep end saying the world is going to end in environmental disaster. And they're not producing the type of movies that take that unscientific approach and terrify people, including kids. They're taking a much more balanced approach. Word has it they're even looking at purchasing Warner Brothers Discovery Channel. Now, whether they do or not, we'll see on that one. But I would say to David Ellison, if you really want a breakthrough and you really want to get the edge on these other big media companies like Disney, for instance, come out with a clear statement that your entire platform, you are not going to be involving or making it even possible for people to be accessing, especially for kids, these very easy sex bot, sex chat, sexual avatar characters. You're just going to make it not available at all. I think you'll get a pretty big attraction from around the world, millions and millions of parents saying they don't want their kids ruined by this sexual addiction, and they will be looking for platforms like David Ellison's should he make a decision to make a really clear announcement on that. No sexual chatbots, sexual AI chatbots and video generation for kids. Just a suggestion there. Now, you want to talk about media platforms, something again that it's almost comical to see how organizations like the CBC in Canada avoid huge stories as the one that just broke out of the BBC in Great Britain, where a couple of major top-line executives have stepped down, and it's all to do with what took place not long ago with a whistleblower within the BBC coming forward and saying that the coverage of, remember the January 6th so-called riots in Washington, and of course Donald Trump was even charged for inciting riots there at the Capitol. And now it's turned out, and they've looked into it because of the good work of this whistleblower, that in fact the comments that Trump was alleged to have made on that day, where he was alleged to be encouraging people to rush to the Capitol and to, attack it and do what had to be done, he clearly maintained that he told people to walk to the Capitol and give support to some of the senators there. That was that's what he always said, he said. But BBC generated footage which then went around the world and was accepted as truth by most other major media sources that Trump was encouraging riots. And now they actually have the tape, they have the footage, they have the words where Trump was very clear in not telling them to go and riot, but in fact to go and protest peacefully. Because of the fact that this was edited, it was cut out of the material by the BBC, some major heads have begun to roll, with two of the top executives now stepping down. This is a huge item in terms of how major mainstream media handles issues that they just don't happen to like. And we'll see what happens. But you know what? I say to the CBC in Canada and to other networks, even though this is widely covered by other networks around the world, wake up, CBC, and at least admit to people that you are actually intellectually defunct in being in so much denial because of your hatred for an individual. It's actually come to that now. This little item now, we've got a psychological term. It's called something like Trump syndrome, Trump derangement syndrome, where it's said that people hate Trump so much that even if he invented a pill that cured cancer, they wouldn't take the pill. I say to networks, especially like Canada's CBC, wake up, start telling people the whole truth. If you would, that would be much appreciated from taxpayers, especially because we're paying for your very existence. In the ongoing gender war, there's going to be an opportunity for people to really get a glimpse at how the public is feeling about the so-called gender issue, gender dysphoria, as related to kids. And some jurisdictions in Canada, the province of Alberta, and some jurisdictions around the world, in the UK and some countries in Europe, have actually put a ban on kids being changed sexually or attempt to be changed sexually, either by pharmaceuticals, puberty blocking drugs, or in fact by surgery involving amputation or significant surgery on the genitals or on the breasts. And a number of places have been ordered to put a stop on this. Now, this is going to come to a real test in Tennessee, coming up in the U.S. In the 7th District there, they've got what's called a special election coming up. It's going to be on December 2nd. And you couldn't have a clearer difference between the two candidates. We've got a woman by the name of Afti Bem, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. She is very upset that there's any kind of a hold on transformative surgery, as it's called, on kids. She actually does a lot of her campaigning with a drag queen who talks about the wonders of little kids being exposed to provocative drag queen dancing, and she's saying it's terrible. Even when the university, Vanderbilt Medical University, recently announced it will no longer be doing alteration surgery on kids. She got quite upset with that, as did a lot of the transgender community. They want it full wide open, that kids would be able to have and be altered surgically for life by these so-called transforming procedures. So she was upset about that, but the candidate who's opposing her in this race, they're running head-to-head against each other, a guy by the name of Matt Van Epps. Now, he's taking the other side. He is saying, which frankly I think most parents support, that there should be no transformative surgery, and I use that phrase carefully, no genital mutilation, no transformative chemicals like puberty drugs until kids are 18, or in some states 21. So they're going neck and neck, head to head, and we're going to have a chance to see what the public has to say about that. A movie right now that's really getting a lot of attention, and in fact, we see it, moviegoers going in greater numbers. It's called Pluribus. And the interesting thing about this movie is it talks about the invasion, in fact, of AI into all aspects of our life, to the place now where in the movies you can't tell if it's a real person you're watching or if it's entirely AI generated. As you know, AI generation is moving along so incredibly fast that thousands and thousands of people in Hollywood are losing their jobs, not just the actors, but producers and writers and animators and others. This particular movie, if you remember the series Breaking Bad, which was hugely popular for a number of years, that series was promoted, or it's the series belonging to Vince Gilligan, and he's come up with the movie called Pluribus. In it, he's talking about the fact and the concerns of this move to AI where you cannot tell the real from the fabricated. So we're going to see where that goes. And incidentally, at the end of his movie, there's something which you may be seeing now more and more coming up, whether it's a broadcast like this, or whether it's a movie, or whether it's a music video. And there'll be a clear disclaimer saying made by humans. So think about that, a new label coming out now, letting people know. I can assure you folks, as you can see from some of the perhaps imperfections in this very podcast, that this podcast was indeed made by humans. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.